There are words that carry a weight that can't be explained by definitions alone. They're terms that, when spoken, make people adjust their posture, breathe a little deeper, and sense that a conversation is coming, one that might shake long-held conviction. Predestination is one of those words. But what's interesting is that, for many ordinary people, the kind who sit in church on Sundays simply trying to understand their faith better, predestination feels like a distant mystery, almost belonging exclusively to theological circles. When you look closely, you notice that this question shows up naturally in real life. Someone goes through a painful season and wonders, was all of this already planned? Another looks at their own journey, full of unexpected turns, and questions whether some kind of purpose was set long before the first step was taken. And at some point, everyone ends up brushing against the subject, even without realizing it. The word, in a biblical context, has always drawn attention because it touches something humans fear and yet desire at the same time. The idea of destiny. People have wrestled with that since forever. From the farmer who studies the sky trying to guess the rain that will define his harvest, to someone who witnesses a sudden change in life and wonders whether it was written somewhere. It's nearly impossible to find someone who has never questioned whether certain moments were meant to happen. But when the topic enters the scriptures, the landscape shifts completely. It's no longer about superstition, luck, horoscopes, or those ready-made sayings about the universe. Biblical predestination has a foundation, a purpose, and a direction that don't blend with human theories. And at the same time, it isn't as simple as many imagine. It's not a secret group chosen randomly, nor a hidden list in heaven deciding who will be accepted or rejected without any consideration. That simply isn't the picture that appears when the text is read calmly, without rush, and without extra layers of human reasoning added to it. That's where many people get surprised, because when you look at the idea of the predestined, you realize the core isn't an unfair favoritism but something far broader. Predestination, in the scriptures, isn't born to exclude, but to reveal a kind of divine intention that has been unfolding long before anyone ever imagined they existed. There is a plan that runs through generations, that touches nations, callings, old promises once considered unlikely, and that leads to an understanding completely different from the fatalistic impressions so many people carry. To understand who the predestined are, it's not enough to look forward and try to guess destiny. You have to look back and see the movement of a story drawn with patience. There are choices, specific missions, human responses, invitations, callings that echo across centuries. All of this builds a setting that makes it clear that predestination isn't merely about isolated individuals, but about a much greater purpose. Something that ties past, present, and future in a way that at first glance might seem unlikely. The theme intimidates some because it feels like free will disappears. Others get excited because they see security in the idea that nothing is random. But before taking any side, it's essential to rebuild the question. Instead of asking, who is chosen and who isn't, perhaps the more honest question is, what would someone be predestined for? And that simple shift opens an entirely new path. Instead of imagining a selection, the focus moves to the purpose. It's not about spiritual status, but about a mission destiny. It's not about an exclusive club, but about a purpose defined by God long before any human discussion existed. And along this path, understanding begins to take shape, because when the purpose of predestination is discovered, it becomes easier to understand who the predestined are. And almost always, the result is far more surprising than expected. When someone asks who the predestined are, they usually imagine a list of names, as if trying to figure out who is already in and who is out. But this approach creates an immediate problem. It turns a broad subject into something resembling a spiritual lottery, and that was never the intention of biblical teaching. Before any discussion about individuals, there is something older, broader, and more structured: the purpose. Imagine a massive work being built, something that takes generations, crosses eras, changes history, and transforms people. Before anyone ever stepped onto the stage of that story, a clear intention already existed. Everything begins not with names, but with a plan. And it is precisely this plan that guides the understanding of predestination. The focus is not on who is selected beforehand, but on why this selection exists. From the beginning, a very clear pattern appears. God establishes a path with a specific goal, a purpose carried out through people chosen to participate in this project. It's like someone forming a team to accomplish something great. The team only exists because the mission exists first. The choosing comes afterward. People aren't selected at random. They are chosen based on what is going to be accomplished. This movement appears repeatedly throughout the biblical narrative. There are callings involving entire peoples. There are moments when God points individuals towards specific roles. There are spoken directives that shape the course of nations. And all of it follows the same pattern. First the purpose, then the calling of those who will take part in it. When this is understood, the question, who are the predestined, begins to take on a different shape. The center isn't a name written before someone is born. It lies in the fact that God defined a destiny for those who would respond to his call. It's not a blind predestination with no human involvement. It's a plan in which God initiates, and the human being is invited to walk within that initiative. There is something interesting in this structure. It does not describe an automatic destiny. What truly exists is an established direction. God decides to form a people for himself, called to live in a way that reflects his will, his goodness, and his character in the world. And within this people, those who respond are shaped to carry this identity. This means that predestination does not speak of arbitrary favoritism, but of a defined objective. People are invited into this purpose, and once inside, they are led into the destiny prepared for them. The idea is not about God choosing some for salvation and others for destruction. The movement is entirely different. God desires a transformed people, dedicated to reflecting his will, and that people is the destiny established from the beginning. Anyone who chooses to walk within that purpose becomes part of that story. This perspective helps resolve a common tension. Many think predestination means everything is already settled before any human decision takes place, but this ignores an essential part of the biblical narrative. People are called, invited, confronted, directed. There are dialogues, reactions, resistance, obedience, failures, and new beginnings. None of that would make sense if everything had been predetermined without participation. What exists is a double truth. God designs the plan and calls people to live within that plan. People respond and are shaped according to what he established from the beginning. Predestination, in this context, is a destiny prepared for those who walk within the life God offers. And this opens the door to an important discovery about who, after all, the predestined are. This answer isn't hidden, nor is it restricted. It becomes clear when the final goal of the plan is observed, and this begins to stand out as the narrative moves forward. For a long time, many tried to define who the predestined are by looking from the outside, as if this identity could be identified simply by observing behavior or religious tradition. But the biblical narrative doesn't build this identity from the outside in. It shows precisely the opposite. The predestined are revealed by the outcome of the calling, by what becomes true inside those who respond to it. To understand this, imagine a simple and familiar situation. Think of someone who receives a life-changing offer, a real opportunity to transform their future. But for that transformation to happen, the person must trust, must walk, must take on the responsibility of following that new path. The promised change doesn't appear just because the invitation exists, but because the person accepts it. The future identity only manifests when the response takes place. This is the central point. Predestination does not describe a hidden group selected ahead of time, but the destiny prepared for those who embrace God's call. It isn't a genetic mark, nor a hereditary privilege, nor a mystical secret. Predestination is tied to transformation, not to arbitrary selection. What defines the predestined is the response to the call, not birth or some kind of invisible seal. The great surprise is that this call is not restricted. It has always moved toward the broadest possible reach. Throughout many moments in the biblical story, it's possible to see God making room for unlikely people. Foreigners, individuals with no religious prestige, people who would never appear to be ideal candidates for any spiritual role. But these people responded. They accepted the invitation. They left behind what they knew. They trusted. And because of that, they were shaped within the purpose God had established from the beginning. That is why the predestined have always formed a diverse community. There is no pattern of appearance, no pattern of background, no pattern of origin. What exists is a process of transformation that identifies those who are truly within this purpose. People who were once marked by destructive choices now begin to show attitudes, thoughts, and decisions that reveal the call was received and produced life. Predestination appears not as an early stamp, but as an embraced destiny. This process of building identity is also gradual. No one wakes up fully shaped. There is no instant jump to spiritual maturity. Those who respond to the call are worked on, corrected, strengthened, and guided. And this reveals another essential point. Predestination does not mean automatic perfection. It means commitment. It means being led. It means being transformed. Along this journey, something important happens. What once seemed distant, incompatible, or impossible begins to feel natural. people begin to act in ways consistent with the plan God established. They do not live this way to be accepted. They live this way because they have been reached and are being shaped according to the prepared purpose. The identity of the predestined is born from this process. People who were called, who responded, and who are being formed to live what God intended from the beginning. That is the real mark. It is not an esoteric title. It is not an invisible position someone receives without knowing. It is a living, daily, noticeable construction. The prepared destiny becomes visible in the way these people are continually transformed. And this destiny is not merely individual. It has a collective, communal dimension that defines not only who the predestined are, but also the kind of impact they have on the world around them. Predestination does not speak only of inner change. It speaks of vocation, of mission, of a purpose lived outwardly. This mission begins to take shape when we look at where this calling was pointing from the very beginning. When someone tries to discover who the predestined are, they usually imagine a distant, almost mystical future, as if predestination were only about the end of the story. But biblical teaching does the opposite. It brings that destiny into the present, into ordinary life, into daily choices. What is revealed is not simply where these people will arrive, but what they become. Predestination points to a way of life marked by one very clear trait: transformation. It is not about human perfection or personal effort to reach some spiritual standard. Transformation appears as the consequence of a work that begins earlier, one that starts in the response to the calling. People who were once guided by impulses, inherited patterns, insecurities, or fears begin to reflect something different, not by merit, but because they have been placed in a process of formation. This prepared destiny involves an inner reconstruction. It is as if someone entered an old house, full of cracks, leaks, mismatched furniture, and dim lighting, and began repairing everything that needed adjustment. Predestination works exactly like that. A planned destiny in which those who respond to the calling are led to become more like the character of Christ. This is the central point of the purpose. It is not about privilege, but about transformation. And an important detail is that this transformation does not happen overnight. Many people become frustrated because they respond to the calling and imagine they should immediately become someone completely new. But the biblical narrative shows real stories, full of conflicts, mistakes, corrections, and new beginnings. Predestination does not erase the process. It guarantees the direction. It is not an instant replacement of the old life, but a continuous restoration. This prepared destiny also includes a sense of clarity. Those who begin living this reality often notice that many things take on new meaning. Conversations change, choices change, priorities change. What once seemed essential starts to lose strength, and what once was difficult to practice begins to make sense. This reorganization of the inner life is an inevitable mark. The predestined are not identified by rituals, but by changes that become visible in relationships, character, and worldview. Another necessary element of this destiny is perseverance. Predestination is not an invitation to a life without challenges. On the contrary, those who respond to the calling face the same pain, crises, and uncertainties as anyone else. The difference is that they do not walk through these things alone, nor without direction. There is a purpose sustaining each step, even when everything seems contradictory. This purpose shapes not only the outcome but also the path. And there is one point many overlook. The destiny of the predestined is not individualistic. Formation does not happen in isolation. It happens in community. The transformation each person experiences is part of a greater process, one meant to form a people, a body, a spiritual family. Predestination does not create solitary figures, but a collective of people who share the same calling and the same destiny. This collective identity reveals the original plan. God would form a people who reflect the character of Christ in the world. This is the heart of the prepared destiny. The predestined are shaped to carry that character, to live that mission, and to express that identity. They are not defined by abilities, by status, by origin, or by personal strength. They are defined by the outcome of the work God accomplishes in them. So who, then, are the predestined? They are those who, when responding to the calling, are led into this kind of life. A life that becomes like Christ's and expresses that transformation in the world. This answer opens the door to another question. If the predestined are those who respond to the calling, how does this response happen, and in what way does it become visible? This begins to take shape when we look at how the biblical story describes the meeting point between the divine call and human reality. The discussion about predestination always raises a centuries-old tension. If there is a prepared destiny, how does it connect with human decision? Many people try to resolve this tension by choosing only one side. Either everything depends on God or everything depends on the person. But the biblical narrative never works that way. It shows two movements happening at the same time, a calling that originates in God and a response that arises in the human heart. And the meeting of these two movements reveals who truly walks in the purpose of predestination. To understand this, it's enough to observe something simple from everyday life. Imagine someone offering an opportunity that can transform not only a person's present, but their entire future. That opportunity reaches them. It is available, it is real. But what determines its impact is not the invitation itself, but the response. If the person ignores it, nothing changes. If they accept it, everything begins to move in a new direction. Predestination works the same way. There is a calling that comes first, but there is also a response that defines the path. This calling does not appear as a mystical voice or an extraordinary experience. It usually emerges in ordinary moments. An inner confrontation no one sees, a quiet discomfort that won't go away, a newly awakened awareness that something needs to change. Many times it begins with the simple realization that life, as it is, no longer makes sense. And at that exact moment, an invisible door opens. The response to this calling is never merely intellectual. It is not just believing something or agreeing with a teaching. The response involves surrender, trust, and movement. It involves leaving internal places that once felt safe, recognizing limits, confronting habits, admitting failures, and accepting transformation. That is why, in practice, the response to the calling becomes visible. It appears in changes of attitude, in the way a person deals with others, in how they face conflicts, in the sincerity of their decision. The life of someone who responds does not remain still, it moves. And this movement is what reveals the predestined. They are not people forced down a certain path, but people who, upon hearing the calling, allowed God to reorganize their priorities and guide their story. Predestination does not erase freedom. It awakens freedom toward the right purpose. Those who respond become part of what was already prepared, and that destiny begins shaping everything from that point on. Another important point is that the response to the calling is not something that happens only once. There is a clear beginning, but there is also continuity. At each stage of the journey, the response is renewed. This means the predestined are not defined by a single isolated decision, but by a sustained path. True response does not fade with time. It proves itself in practice. Even in falls, there is return. Even in doubts, there is seeking. Even in inner conflicts, there is surrender. This dynamic reveals something precious. Predestination is not about perfect people, but persistent people. People who, despite their struggles, continue turning toward God's purpose. People who, even without understanding everything, choose to remain. People who, even wounded, continue being shaped. And there is one detail that cannot be ignored. The response to the calling does not arise naturally in the human heart. It is awakened, stirred, drawn out by God's own action. It is not personal merit. It is a grace that reaches, convinces, and transforms. The person responds, but responds because they were touched first. It is in this combination, God calling and the human being responding, that predestination becomes real in someone's story. When this reality is established, the signs begin to appear. The prepared destiny manifests itself in practice. Identity is solidified. Transformation becomes visible, and from that point on, one question gains strength. What impact should the predestined have on the world around them? Because predestination does not shape individuals only. It shapes witnesses, living influences, people who carry a mission. When the word predestination enters a conversation, many imagine something abstract, almost theoretical. But when the biblical narrative shows who the predestined truly are, the subject becomes extremely concrete. It is not a spiritual title for debate. It is a way of life that leaves marks on the world. People reached by this calling do not live isolated, nor do they hide behind doctrine. They become living evidence of a purpose in motion. The impact begins with the way these people see their own journey. Those who walk under this destiny understand that the transformation they received is not only for themselves. What God does within them becomes a tool to reach others. Life is no longer guided by immediate impulses, but is directed by meaning. There is a sense of mission, even if the word mission is never spoken. It is perceptible. The predestined carry a mark. Wherever they go, they create spaces of hope. This impact also appears in relationships. People who respond to the calling do not become superior, nor do they behave as if they own the truth. The movement is the opposite. They become more human, more sensitive, more aware of their own weaknesses, and for that very reason, more willing to welcome, teach, and restore. The predestined do not win hearts by force. They influence through the transformation they carry. They live in a way that awakens questions, not accusation. Over time, this posture creates something the Bible continually describes: a people who reveal the character of Christ, a people who exist not because they possess merit, but because they were shaped, molded, and guided. This people becomes a living sign in the midst of a fragmented world. It is like a light that does not need to strive to shine. It simply shines because it was lit. Furthermore, the impact of the predestined includes the courage to remain when everything around them loses meaning. It is not that they have unshakable faith from the beginning. It is that they learn to trust even in the midst of chaos. People like this do not fall apart when facing crises because they know the purpose they carry does not depend on the stability of the moment. And this quiet firmness, this stability that grows from within, inspires those around them. Another point is that the predestined do not only receive transformation, they become instruments of it. Where there is discouragement, they bring comfort. Where there is confusion, they bring clarity. Where there is injustice, they bring conviction. Where there is division, they build bridges. This impact does not happen by programming but by nature. When the character of Christ is formed, actions follow. There is also a collective impact. Predestination forms a community with its own identity, people who recognize one another not by appearance, culture, or background, but by purpose. Together, they become the visible expression of something bigger, a people called to represent who God is. This people does not exist to isolate itself, but to influence the environment around them, showing through life what words alone could never fully communicate. And finally, there is the deepest impact: hope. The predestined carry a destiny that does not depend on earthly circumstances, and this dimension brings peace in moments when anyone else would collapse. Not because they ignore reality, but because they see beyond it. The future is not a threat, it is a promise, and that gives the courage to live with purpose today. In the end, who are the predestined according to the Bible? They are those who were called, responded, and are being shaped to carry the character of Christ. They are not defined by luck, genealogy, or performance. They are defined by the purpose that transforms them and by the life that grows from that purpose.